Ohio lawmakers petitioned the NCAA to reinstate vacated wins from the 2010 football season, potential college football rule changes, and what team shows up on the court tonight as your Buckeyes face the Spartans. All that and more right here on Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Thursday, March 3rd in the year 2022, and I would like to thank every person out there for making Locked On Buckeyes their first listen of every single day. It's been over 10 years since Tattoo Gate was something that Buckeye fans were tired of hearing and Buckeye fans got mad about, furious about, and irritated with the NCAA for how they handled this situation. 5 Buckeye players got in trouble for exchanging memorabilia in return for tattoos. Those players, Terrell Pryor, Daniel Boom-Herron, DeVere Posey, Mike Adams, and Solomon Thomas. And due to their infraction, the NCAA saw fit to vacate 12 wins, all 12 Buckeye wins from that season. It's been over 10 years. I thought at this time, people would realize the NCAA is not going to do anything, give anything back that they took during that season. The stats, the wins, it's not going to happen. But then the Ohio lawmaker said, how about we take a shot at getting these wins back? State Representative Brian Stewart, who is sponsoring this resolution, says that the vacated wins unfairly hurt players and coaches that had nothing to do with the scandal, and points out that the NCAA has recently radically altered its rules regarding player name, image, and likeness. That whole statement came right from an article on 11warriors.com. Also, Mr. Stewart says this, quote, "This resolution does not say anything about the sanctions. This resolution says enough is enough. The NCAA's view of what is permissible for players has changed drastically in the last 12 years. Here's something else in this article that I think is very fitting for this point in time in regards to these wins coming back and being reinstated by the NCAA. It's worth noting that while the NCAA does now allow athletes to profit off their name, image, and likeness, Ohio State's current name, image, and likeness guidelines still prohibit athletes from selling team-issued equipment and apparel until NCAA eligibility is exhausted. So the Tattoo Gate scandal still would not have been permissible today. I understand what everybody wants. I understand what the push for. I understand why people keep going to the NCAA to reinstate something that the NCAA took away over 10 years ago. These 5 players, they try to get things going. The lawmakers are trying to get things going. Can we just realize that these boys broke a rule, and that because you broke the rule, the NCAA had the opportunity to hand down the punishment that they saw fit for the crime because these boys broke the rule? Not really a crime, like they're going to jail, but because you broke a rule, there is a punishment for said rule. And because of the punishment that was here, the NCAA decided to take this chance to punish Ohio State. That's the rule. Can we just get that in our minds that these stats and that these wins aren't coming back? Reggie Bush didn't get his Heisman back at all. He tried after the NIL went into place to get his Heisman back. He is still looked at and viewed as the Heisman winner for the year. It may have been 05, 04, or 06. Forgive me for getting the year wrong. But can we just get it in our mind? What's it going to take for us to get it in our heads that because those boys broke a rule, even if you don't agree with the rule, they broke a rule, the punishment was handed down, forget it. Absolutely forget it. Now, you may say, Jay, these are Ohio lawmakers. They know the law. They know how to go in and out and go about their rule. Absolutely, they do. However, that means absolutely nothing. The boys broke the rule. The rule will still be broken if it happened today. But they broke the rule back there in that season. The NCAA handed down a punishment. So be it. Imagine you people going back and retroactively saying, oh, well, we changed rules, so the gun law has changed now versus what it was 30 years ago. So that 30 years ago rule that you broke, we're wiping that clean. Oh, you know what happened? Man, we changed our rules, and so the thing you did 5 days ago, we're wiping that clean. What are we doing? What are we teaching people? Why is it so hard for people to understand if a rule is broken, a punishment will be handed down? And when that punishment is handed down, it don't matter what happens tomorrow, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years down the road. It don't matter. You broke the rule. There's a punishment. So be it. But maybe this is just a part of our society. Maybe society is saying, hey, man, what happened 10 years ago don't mean nothing. We're going to change things to help you out, and we're going to make this a special case for y'all to get y'all things back. Because you know what this is going to happen? What's going to happen? If the NCAA allows this to happen, they got to go back and give Reggie Bush that Heisman back. Even though I am still baffled that the NCAA does not govern Division I-A or FBS football, but they're still able to hand down punishment when rules are broken or take away. You took away a trophy that the NCAA doesn't hand out, that college football, whoever is running it, all these different people, they handing it out. The Heisman Trust, a private company, hands off this trophy, and because Reggie Bush is playing football and he's an NCAA athlete, you're taking away an award that he didn't even get handed by you, but he broke a rule. So be it. It sucks. Absolutely sucks. But it's about time people get it in their heads. Even though you don't like the rule, they broke a rule. And when you break a rule, there should be, and there probably will be a punishment. The punishment is there. You get over it, move on from it, live with it. That may be an unpopular thing to say, but I think it's correct for the situation. You break the rule, there's a punishment, so be it. Move on. Let's go on with our lives. College football is a sport that is, I think, in a good place. Not the best place. I think it's in a good place. I believe college football is in a place that if you were to ask me this question, let's say 3-4 years ago, is college football in a good place? I would say, oh yeah, it's in a good place. If you were to ask me this, let's just say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would say, yeah, college football is in a good place. The BCS era from 98 until 2013 and the 2014 till now, you have the college football playoff era. If you go back to the 90s, you started to have somewhat of a quote unquote or officially unofficial national championship game. They try to rule it a national championship game, even though the Rose Bowl was not allowed to be a part of that. So the Pac-10 champ and the Big Ten champ weren't allowed to play for a part of that group of the national championship game, where those conferences that played for that trophy in that game, which is why 97, you have a split national champion, which is what propelled the BCS era. I would have said college football is in a good place. I still think it's in a good place. But even though it's in a good place, it's not in the best place it can be. And there are some rules that can happen, that can be made on the field to make what we watch every single Saturday, that product on the field, a whole lot better. There are 2 potential rule changes. I'm going to read this right here to you so you can better understand what's going on, what's on the table. And the second one that I'm going to read is something that was stated on this podcast. I think Jeff Hunt was on here, may have been Mo Murphy. But I stated on the podcast a few times about an easy way to shorten the length of games. The first potential rule change, treating incomplete passes the same as runs out of bounds. I'm going to read this right here to you to better explain it for you. Beginning in 2008, the clock started after runs and fumbles out of bounds when the referee signaled ready for play. Previously, the clock started on the snap after such plays. The committee is considering treating incomplete passes the same way. The rule would be in effect until late in the half or game, perhaps the last 2 to 5 minutes, according to Shaw. This is coming from an article on CBSSports.com. So the clock being altered, player safety being involved, this is the mindset behind these two rules. Piece of college football that differentiates it from the NFL. This change has long been considered, but the game's overseers have been hesitant in part because it would make the college game more like the NFL. I'm going to pause right here and go back to something. The game's overseers, who are the game's overseers? I mean, we know people that cover the sport. We know people that talk about the sport. We know there are athletic directors and Bill Hancock and Gary Bardo, part of the playoff committee. Who are the overseers? I know this is a little side note, but my brain kind of saw that word. I was like, wait a minute. Who are the overseers? Because I don't know who the overseers are. I don't even know if the overseers know they are overseers. And because of that, people don't know who runs the sports. A lot of people have their hands in the pot. And those hands in the pot sometimes start fighting, start feuding. We get the BCS, get the playoff era, and eventually we're going to get playoff expansion because those hands that are in the pot, nobody really has the upper hand. They just start fighting and going back and forth, and we keep getting changes because nobody's on the same page. But treating incomplete passes the same as runs out of bounds, a way to alter the clock. The clock started after runs and fumbles out of bounds when the referee signaled ready for play. That began in 2008, almost at 18. And then no longer stopping the clock after first downs. These are two ways, for one, them to accomplish something they want to accomplish, which is player safety, making the game safer for the players. And if you don't want to continue altering these rules, I'm glad, because things are getting so weird. You can't touch these quarterbacks. Some of the hits that aren't illegal, they're ruled illegal, and people are like, wait, what are we watching? Let's play football. And the refs are like, wait, what about player safety? And players are like, wait, what about playing football? And once again, the coaches are like, well, we got to find a middle ground, but they can't find a middle ground when it comes to player safety. So instead of altering and throwing more flags, how about we alter when an incomplete pass, when the clock starts after that, and stop, no longer stopping the clock after first downs. I'm on board with both of these. Absolutely on board. I think that this is a perfect way to make the game better. I mean, if you want to look at college football as a whole right now, the sport's not in a bad place. You see all the hoopla and all the discussions and debates about playoff expansion, about potentially having or possibly why then there is a need for a governing body, about all the different things about the FCS, and maybe the group of five in the Power Five should break apart because there's a different level of football being played. But then Cincinnati made the playoff, and they deserve to make the playoff. So maybe they should change things. But then Cincinnati is joining a Power Five conference, so maybe there should be a Power Five group of five break off and have 3 divisions of Division I football instead of the 2 that are currently there. So many things people talk about, but the sport's not in a bad place. The one complaint that I hear all the time, and this is something I've complained about myself, is the games are too long. It don't take a rocket scientist to realize these football games are taking way too long. The NFL game, it's like clockwork. 3 hours in and out, on to the very next game. 3 hours in and out, you're going home to the house with a W, leaving the stadium that you were at. 3 hours in and out very, very quickly. You can go on back, meal prep for the week. It's like clockwork, baby. But college football, is it going to be 3 hours? No, it's going to be 3.5 hours. It's possible. A lot of games last year that only took 3.5 hours. But I've been used to the 4-hour thing, which is so long. Another way they can make the game shorter and help player safety so the players are not out there as long. This was not there. This is going to tap into the pocketbook of these companies, which they don't want to mess with. But how about y'all cut down on how many commercials y'all have during the game? You want to know what you can do with that in the name of player safety? These companies will pay more money to put their commercial right there in your broadcast. You know what that is? Paying more money, less commercials, player safety, boom, problem solved. But for these two things that I just mentioned, these potential rule changes, I firmly think these things will happen. And I think that the idea of no longer stopping the clock, of stopping the clock, excuse me, the idea of stopping the clock after first downs is something that has been a problem for a long time. People have not liked it for a long time, but people have not wanted to speak up about that thing for a very long time in a way that they should have, be as forceful as they should have. Forget making it more like the NFL game. It's football. It's football. Make the rules more universal, alter things the way they need to be altered. The rest can be history. I'm on board with this. I hope this happens. And I think coaches will be happy with these changes too. This Ohio State basketball team is one that is very confusing. During the game on Tuesday, I got a text. I want to make sure I pull this. It's 2 days ago. Too many texts have been exchanged between that time and this time. But I got a text during Tuesday's game, and it was simply, "We stink!" exclamation point. Very much summed up the way that many of you probably thought about how the basketball team played during that game. We stink! Exclamation point. There was a little explanation after that as well about some things that happened during the game, but very poor performance. Chris Holtman is now pointing the fingers and saying it's on me, which all season long is like, oh, we obstacle this, obstacle that. We got to kind of just learn from it. I remember during the football season, Ryan, they kept saying, we haven't seen that before, so we got to go to the film and see what happened. And I'm like, wait, why is this coming after multiple games? I understand after game 1, game 2, maybe game 3, but after game 8, game 9, game 10 in the football season, you're saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And yes, I understand Ohio State's football team was young, but you're saying the same thing over and over, and it's very confusing. But what's more confusing is this basketball team. One, is there something in the water at this school? Because for the football team to have the injuries and the players to not be as healthy as we would have expected them to be, it's very concerning of the football team, then also the basketball team. I mean, Michi Johnson got hurt this year. Jabari Wheeler's missed some time. Justice Suink has been out basically the whole year. I think he played one game, but he's basically been out the whole year. Seth Towns has missed the entire season. Kyle Young missed a game with an illness. EJ Liddell was in the hospital with the flu. Now, some of these things you cannot predict, you cannot stop, but you got to realize Eugene Brown III missed a game. Zed Key, twisted ankle, missed a game. Like I said, some of these things cannot be altered. They're just going to happen. But however, some of these things just don't seem right. Something seems off. When I think about the injuries, think about how Chris Holtman has used his team. Look back at Tuesday's game. He played 11 players in the first half. Yes, 11 players in the first half. Experimenting late in the season is not normal. It's not ideal. Most coaches shorten their rotation. Chris Holtman is trying to figure things out due to injuries. Things are really, really odd, and I have no idea. There's a question. I don't have an answer to it. I'm going to tell you that right now. What team's going to show up for the Ohio State Buckeyes tonight? Because I don't think you have the answer. I don't think Chris Holtman has the answer. I think there have been times I've watched this team play basketball. There is a thing with Malachi Branham and EJ Liddell. Branham has the green light. He can create. He can go get his own shot. But I wonder if they know, if they still know, Liddell is that dude. As good as Branham is at playing basketball, you cannot knock or diminish how good he has been, how fluid he has been on the basketball court, which is why he has been known as, or I'm going to start calling him, the flourishing freshman. There have been times late in games when the ball needs to go to EJ. And Malachi just keeps that rock, don't pass to nobody, tries to go to the hole, tries to get a mid-range. The defense collapses. The defense knows what's going to happen. One shot, Defense gets the rebound, going the other way. Not knowing what team is going to show up in this game is not good for anybody involved. And as I was looking at the Big Ten standings, I am sure that there are teams in the Big Ten Conference that realize Ohio State is not themselves right now, not just because of the injuries. This has been a problem. Energy and effort on the offensive glass, being a collective unit and a cohesive unit on the defensive end, defensive rotations, movement on the offensive end, making sure you are doing your part. Numerous players are realizing on the opposite team, we can play with these guys, we can beat these guys. And they're also realizing maybe this team overachieved because they don't have the good enough players to really do the things that Buckeye fans want them to do. Current Big Ten standings, the Buckeyes are in 5th. They are fighting and scratching and clawing to try to get that double bye in the Big Ten Conference tournament. Number 1 in the conference, Wisconsin. Number 2, Illinois. Number 3, Purdue. Number 4, Iowa. All of those teams, well, 3 of the 4 teams beat Ohio State. Ohio State did beat Illinois on the road. Ohio State's number 5, number 6, Rutgers, number 7, Michigan State, number 8, Michigan, number 9, Indiana, number 10, Penn State. The bottom part of the conference is not very good, but as I say that, the bottom feeder in the conference, a team that only has 3 wins in league play in Nebraska, just beat Ohio State by 8. So, might add for that game, Nebraska did not score a bucket did not score a field goal in the final 4:09 of that game on Tuesday. Now you understand why when I say what team is going to show up for Ohio State tonight, I don't know. I don't think you know. I think that may make you nervous going into the game because nobody knows what's going to happen. Ohio State is favored to beat Michigan State tonight. Michigan State lost, I think, 6 of 7, and it just beat Purdue. So there are things that are happening there where it's like, oh, wow. So maybe they are going to be in a positive mood. This is Izzo's time. This is their time to shine. And it's supposed to be Holtman's time to shine. It's supposed to be the Buckeyes' time to shine. Remember, late in the season last year, they kind of fizzled out a little bit, played really well in the Big Ten Conference tournament, came really close to winning the conference tournament as well. Then the Oral Roberts game happened. And then we get this year. Very confusing. Take injuries aside because you know what? In 5 years or even in 6 months, nobody's going to be talking about the injuries this team had. They're going to talk about their win-loss record and how this team really, with the talent that they had, there's a problem. There's a problem with this team. It's going to be put on Front Street. Nobody talks about injury 6 months from now. They're going to look at the record and talk about the downfall, the issues this team had and why they didn't have 23, 24, 25 wins. They may barely have over 20 at the end of the season, and it's all because of their play on the court and their consistently inconsistent play. Guys, don't want to end the show on a rough note, but sometimes you have to. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. You can send all of your emails to jstevens317 at gmail.com. I once again want to thank everyone for making Locked On Buckeyes their first to listen of every single day. Now that it's the perfect time to make your second listen of the day, the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your fine podcast.